Today is Saturday, November 15th for the alternative school, and my name is Shelley Zorn, and I'm interviewing Gloria Pylant. Gloria, tell me, were you born in Turner County?
I was.
Okay.
What? No, excuse me,
No?
Shelley. I was born in Crisp County and moved to Turner County when I was 6 years old.
Okay, so almost all of your life.
Right.
What did your parents do here in Turner County?
My dad had a farm machinery company, Ellis Farm Equipment. It was right on North Main Street, and my mother worked reading books. It was a family-owned business.
Okay. Did he have that business all of his life here in Turner County?
His daddy had a farm equipment business in Crisp County.
Okay.
And they expanded and came down here and opened a second branch. So, yeah, he's been farm equipment forever.
Okay. So you went to the Turner County school system.
I did.
All right. You went here to this building, right?
I did. When I grew up in this county, this school was like first grade through originally 11th and then changed to 12th. And so I went to this school from the time I moved to Turner County, second grade, all the way through 10th grade. And then we consolidated and made Turner County High School. So I was in the second class that graduated from Turner County High School.
Okay. Do you have any interesting stories that you remember from school days here?
Well, now, one thing that might be of interest, I was in 6th grade when we had the huge fire that burned this school
I was
down.
going to ask you that next.
Yeah. So that was a really unbelievable. Fire trucks came from every county around to help put this out. I mean, it was a huge blaze. There used to be a huge auditorium. Of course, I'm saying huge because for me at my age it was huge. If I could see it now, it might not be. But it was a big building, and everything burned except this section of the building that we're in now. And so it made for a really different year. We still had to go to school, even though the schoolhouse burned down.
So how did you go to school?
We got farmed out everywhere. We had some grades that went over to Rebecca. There was an old school that had been closed. They opened that up. We had some grades that went to Dakota. They opened that building back up. We had classes in the churches. Now, I was lucky. I got to go down in the basement of this building. We actually kept, we had some classes that could stay in this, and then we were able to keep a few, like, wherever we could find. Some people had to go to the gym. It was just a very disjointed year.
Do you remember how you felt, what emotions you felt about everybody being farmed off to different places?
Yeah, it was fun in the beginning because, everybody wants a vacation from school when you're in 6th grade. So it was fun, but then, you got like having to go downstairs in the dark, and there wasn't a lunchroom, and after a while it got to be a real pain. And you couldn't see everybody, because everybody was so scattered. So it started off being kind of a great thing, but then it turned out we realized we'd rather have the schoolhouse.
Do you remember the day of the fire?
I do.
What did they do the day of the fire?
It happened at night. The fire late afternoon, because I remember no one was at school, that's for sure. And I remember all the fire trucks. And of course, this was prior to television. We had radio, we didn't have a lot of television. So anytime a siren went off or there was any kind of excitement, everybody flocked. So I imagine everybody in Ashburn, Georgia, surrounded this block. And of course, you can imagine with all the fire trucks coming in and all the excitement. So, the horror of what was happening, the fact that this building was burning down, was not the emotion I think everybody was feeling. It was just the excitement of this huge fire and everybody flocking to see and, this kind of thing. And then after, everything was burning and you begin to hear murmurings, I can remember people talking about, it's our schoolhouse and, things like that. And then everybody began to get a little somber about the effect that this was going to have. Because this was a lot of memories burning down for a lot of people. Because most people that were standing around watching, this had been where they had gone to school for so many years.
What year did it burn? Do you remember?
Let me see if I can go back to the year. It was in the early 50s.
And do you know how the fire came about? Did they ever determine, or do you remember at that
I
age how
don't,
the fire?
I don't remember hearing, and I hadn't thought to even ask anybody that question since it burned down. It just burned. You know how that just kind of gets in your mind.
Yeah.
But no, I don't remember hearing the cause of the fire.
I had heard this building was like white. Is that true?
Yes, years before, and I'm not sure. Maybe even in the 30s, it might have burned before, because if you look at photographs, the architecture of the building was preserved, but at one time it was 2 stories in the center, and then I think that big auditorium was added in the back, and so the 2 stories were just where the auditorium had such a high ceiling. But it's burned pretty completely down a couple of times.
Can you tell me any other experiences you remember about having no school, or any of the people that you were involved with during that time as a child when you had no school?
Well,
teachers or students?
I remember from my brother especially, we think of this as being rural, but we lived only a few blocks from school, so we never rode the school bus. Well, when the schoolhouse burned down, he ended up having to ride the school bus over to Rebecca. So I remember hearing experiences about riding the school bus and what fun that was. And I always thought it was so wonderful to ride a school bus. But my friends that rode the school bus always said, no, be glad that you don't have to ride a school bus.
What about, you said there was no lunchroom during that time. What did y'all do for lunch?
We had to walk home for lunch or bring a lunch. But lots of us walked home. Most of my friends walked home for lunch because we lived within a block or two of this building. But I'm sure that the people that rode school buses probably bought lunch and had lunch, outside or in some place in the building.
Was the mascot the Turner County Rebels even at that time, or did
No,
they have a mascot?
You know what it was? We were the Bears, the Bearcats.
I heard that.
As I remember, it seems like that was the mascot.
Well, tell me after school, what did you do personally after, what did you go on to do after high school?
Oh, after high school. Well, I went to college in Atlanta, and I ended up being interested in science, so I was a biology major. And then when I got my BA degree, I decided that I wanted to live in another part of the country, and I wanted to live in a big city because I'd always lived in Wisconsin. So I had a roommate that also, she was from Selma, Alabama, and she wanted to live in a big city in another part. So we decided that we would like to live in Boston, Massachusetts. So I was a science major, so I arranged to have interviews with the Harvard Medical School, and she was going to go up and get a job with a book company. She was an English major. So we caught the train to Boston, Massachusetts, the spring that we were seniors, and we went up for interviews. Well, I got a job, and she got the promise of a job because there were lots of English majors in that area. So we came back, and I planned to go to live in Boston, Massachusetts in July of that same year. Well, about 3 weeks after we had gotten back, she decided instead of going to Boston, she was going to get married and go to California. So she got married and went to California, but I decided that I was going to go on anyway. So I moved to Boston, Massachusetts in July of '63.
By yourself?
By myself, on an airplane. Went in, I stayed at YWCA. That's the only place I knew to stay because I had heard songs about. So I stayed at the YWCA and started work. Then I moved into a boarding house, and then I met some girls and moved into an apartment with them. And I lived in Boston. I married there, had a child, lived there about 7 years. Then I came back to Ashburn, and I divorced.
Oh, okay. Well, what is your experience as far as the difference between a big town like Boston and coming back to Ashburn? How did you feel about Ashburn when you came back?
Well, after the trauma of divorce, I was really wanting to come back what was familiar because I had a small child that I wanted to raise. And of course, you kind of want to raise your child to have some of the same experiences you did, and I wanted to support a family. So I came back very willingly to So I came back for the good things about it. So I was excited to be here, but I missed a lot of things that I had grown accustomed to. You know, like
Theater.
yeah, and many different kinds of restaurants to eat in, and lots of different exciting people to meet. But the funniest thing for me, the biggest adjustment, was when I came back. I had been working like in a research laboratory. I had moved from Harvard Med to Mass General Hospital to the Robert Brigham Hospital. So I was always around very intellectual, you know, well-educated people. So I came back home and started teaching, and this was the first year that the schools were integrated. So my ear heard the more precise English from where I had lived, and I came back and went right into teaching. And I thought that I had lost my hearing. I could not hear words. Here I was trying to teach children, and it was like they were saying, blah, 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 and I would say, I beg your pardon, blah, 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 and I'd say, I'm sorry, I can't understand what you're saying. I beg your pardon. And it was just awful. That
People here kind of mumble.
Yeah, it took a long time for my ear to get back to where I could understand. But the hardest thing was the fact that I had been used to drinking coffee all day, and then you got back to the school, you don't have a break all day long. I mean, you start at 8 and you finish at 3:30. And I remember walking out of that building thinking, how did I get to this place? I can't imagine that I'm going to do this all my life. But
so how long did you teach?
Well, I finished
I know you still
I was 18 years in the
classroom. Okay, 18 years in the classroom.
And loved it. You know, once I got past that first year and got where I could hear again, and you know, all those minor things.
Do you have any experiences you can think of teaching here in the County School System? Anything that comes to mind? Any interesting students? Or?
Well, I can remember the first 5 that first year that I experienced. Because again, you've got to remember, I'm coming from this very civilized, you know, very polite type of a professional environment to coming in. And of course, the first year that we integrated the schools, no one was prepared for the number of kids and all. So, you know, I had huge classes, like 37 kids in a classroom. And I don't think really anybody knew the tremendous developmental delays that some of our Afro-American children had. So that when they got into the regular classrooms, there was a tremendous variety of reading levels and what they could do. So here I had this class of 37 kids. Some of them very old, were like ninth graders. And they couldn't read. And yet I was supposed to teach them science. And, you know, to me, teaching science was like teaching research science. You know, I mean, I was ready to get in there and teach them some science. And they couldn't read. And so I remember and I had just never, I never seen the poverty that I saw in the children now. We don't see that now. But that first year of integration, it was just heart-wrenching.
What year did they integrate here?
1970.
Do you remember any experiences just from the integration itself? Any conflict or anything that happened that
integration here was very smooth. Okay. You know, we really didn't have any kind of incidents. You know, I remember that it was difficult for the children, but, you know, as far as any kind of, you know, racial incidents, you know, we didn't have that, which was good. I think that was really some good, strong leadership and, you know, some hard work to make it smooth.
Okay, Gloria, you had mentioned something about your first year there during integration. I guess that was 1970, about a fight. And I forgot.
Yeah.
We got off on something else.
Oh, Lord. Like I said, there were about 37 kids in the classroom. So you can imagine the long rows of kids that you stand there and look and you
a lot. And
so because there was so much trouble trying to find a common way to teach, sometimes, you know, there'd be lags, and I was the first year teacher, so I wasn't keeping them engaged real well. But anyway, I was expounding about something that I thought was very important that they should learn about. And of course, obviously, they were not that interested in it because all of a sudden, just out in the middle of what I'm talking about, this girl flies out of her desk across the aisle and attacks this boy. And I'm standing there saying,
You don't even know how this happened.
Yeah, I've never seen people fight before. And so, of course, all the class gets excited. Everything becomes complete, total disorder. And so it's like, how did this happen? And what do I do? I mean, I was standing there in shock. And so, of course, idiot goes over to get in the middle of the fight and try to break it up. Well, I mean, the girl's just completely beyond any control. She is so mad. Long fingernails, she's clawing, there's blood. The boy is, I mean, this is like a boy he's fighting with now, so he's slamming and knocking, and everybody in the room is hollering and screaming. And I just couldn't believe that I was in the middle of that. How it ended, I don't know. I think they fought until they just literally both were on the ground and desks were all around them. And then finally some other men fingers got in there and helped to break it up. And I mean, the kids really hurt each other. And I was so horrified. I thought, it's not enough money to pay me to do this. I don't need to be here. But, they got settled down and, you talk about it, and I learned.
So this probably wasn't a racially motivated.
No, these were two Afro-American children, because the whole class was all were blacks, and they had just he said something about her mama, and that's the first time I heard that, her mama. Uh-huh. And if you want two kids to fight, one of them just makes some remark about the other's mama, and they're off to the races. So I learned a lot here that I had never.
Let me ask you this that I'm curious about. Did the black teachers that were at Eureka, did they come over to these schools?
Yes.
So they integrated teachers also?
They did.
And did the classrooms become part white, part black, or what did they do?
There were some classes. Again, schools have a way, especially in the 70s, of segregating according to ability. Mm-hmm. And unfortunately, many times that led to racial segregation too. So that you would have a class that was perhaps only above grade level, and it would be majority white with some black. Mm-hmm. And then those classes, and this was because of the poverty, those classes that were much, much lower usually were all black. Mm-hmm. And, they might have one or two white things. But again, it went back to those poverty things that caused that later possibility. It took, I would say, in my experience, it was about 10 years before we began to see almost some middle ground as far as the poverty, the way the kids came to school. When I first started teaching, we literally had kids that came and not had a bath in a week or more, and they wore really soiled clothes, and but now you've got to remember, in our county, we were still pretty much agricultural, and some of our poorest people actually lived in homes in the country that had no inside plumbing, or they got their water from a well. And so these were kids that were coming from those homes.
So were the black and white children coming to school in that condition?
But much more black than white. There were some isolated families.
You said you learned a lot that first year. Can you think of anything in particular, any memories of anything you learned in particular?
Well, I learned that I couldn't teach science the way I wanted to, that I had to really, get more to the level that the kids were. And that was quite an experience of trying many different things to make the class want to learn science and to enjoy science. And I learned a lot. I had been away from teenagers. I'd been in a completely academic environment, and I came back to teaching middle school. And I just had to relearn a lot about children. I'm trying to think specifically. Of course, I learned a lot about the black culture, because even though I grew up in the South, I grew up in a time of total segregation. And I remember even when I was in the North, and there was so much in the 60s about segregation, when they would ask me a question, I didn't remember it. I mean, I knew there was a water fountain for the white and a water fountain for the black, but that's just the way it was, and I never thought about it. And I knew that there was a section upstairs for the black people to sit in, and the white people sat downstairs. But that's just the way it was, and I never thought about it.
Didn't seem like a big deal.
No. And so when I was asked questions, I realized that I had never really looked at where I lived. So when I came back and we were in the midst of segregating, it was a real question of time for me. And of course, I was very idealistic at that time, and so I had come from Boston, Massachusetts, and then, the Kennedys were there, and everybody was very pro-segregation. And then I was back in Ashburn, Georgia, and, my dad said things like, when I talked about a student and, leaning over them to help him, and he said, "You didn't get close enough to smell him, did you?" I mean, it's just,
Yeah.
and people just had no concept here of what they were saying and what their attitude was. And so it was, it's a real eye-opening experience for me to come back from that to where it was accepted, and then once again to look
But this
see.
time you were questioning.
I was questioning, and I was
what
seeing
was normal
the different
before.
things. Yeah.
What are some of the things you think that you question?
Well, there were definitely injustices, like the white teachers were automatically assumed to be better teachers, and yet we had some excellent black teachers, and so it bothered me that some of the way that staff was used going forward, and that was just what it was like. The white kids were assumed to be the smartest, and yet there were some very bright black kids. And, it was real hard to work within that context and, trying to be fair and trying to, do just things. It took a lot of thought, a lot of reflection. You had to think about what you were doing. So,
Do you think that has affected you now as an administrator to have gone through that?
yeah. Oh, I think it's made me more sensitive to kids that are different, whether it's because of handicap or background or culture or whatever. Yeah, I think I do think about that maybe a little bit more because of having gone through that time. And I think sometimes, I think I do still think about if I'm putting a committee together, I want to be sure that all groups are represented. And maybe trying to think of that a little bit more. So I think it had a profound influence. Going through that time.
Okay, well, Gloria, thank you so much for talking to us today. You've got some good stories.